"Excuse me, you're in my seat," the young black girl said calmly, holding out her first-class boarding pass. Her voice was soft but steady, the kind of steady that comes from knowing the truth is on your side. The man sitting in 2A didn't even glance at the ticket. He smirked, leaning back into the plush leather as though the cabin belonged to him alone. "First come, first served," he muttered, his tone dripping with smugness. Passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Silence stretched across first class like a coward's shield. The flight attendant arrived, her polished smile already cracking with irritation. She didn't ask for the boarding pass. She didn't check the seat chart. She simply glanced at Amara's brown skin, her small frame, and snapped, "You'll have to take a seat in economy. We need to get this flight moving." Humiliation flushed across Amara Jenkins's face. At 11 years old, she stood in an aisle filled with adults who refused to meet her eyes. The boarding pass trembled in her hand, Seat 2A printed in bold black ink, but the man occupying it stared straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge her existence. "I paid for first class," he said through clenched teeth, his voice rising. "And I'm not giving up my seat to accommodate some disruption." The word hung heavy, bitter with implication. Amara froze, her lips parted, but no words came. Tears threatened at the corners of her eyes. To the strangers around her, she looked like just a child, powerless, alone. But she wasn't. Her father, Marcus Jenkins, stepped into the aisle. Tall, composed, his tailored suit stretched over shoulders taut with barely contained fury. He placed a hand on Amara's shoulder, his voice calm but edged with steel. "My daughter's seat," he said, each syllable deliberate, "was purchased weeks ago. She has the boarding pass to prove it." The flight attendant hesitated, eyes darting between Marcus's unwavering gaze and the scowling man in 2A. Passengers whispered now, the tension rippling through the cabin like static before a storm. Still, no one moved. No one acted. And that was the mistake, because Amara Jenkins was no ordinary passenger. She wasn't just an 11-year-old girl. She was a prodigy who had quietly built a tech empire from her bedroom, an empire worth billions. She was the youngest billionaire in America, a symbol of possibility and change, and in her small, trembling hand was not only a boarding pass, it was leverage. What the passengers, the crew, and especially the man in 2A did not realize was that this mundane dispute was ticking down like a clock. In exactly 4 minutes, a phone call would be made. In exactly 4 minutes, the balance of power would shift. And in exactly 4 minutes, the captain's voice would thunder through the cabin with chilling finality. "This aircraft is returning to the gate. Security will be boarding." The humiliation would not remain hers. It would spread, unravel, and expose truths that some had spent lifetimes trying to bury. And it all began with a stolen seat. Welcome to Respect Wins Stories, the place where powerful tales come alive. No matter where you are watching this video from, whether it is New York, Texas, California, or anywhere across the United States, or even from the other side of the world, I would love to know, where are you watching from today? Please share it in the comments below while you sit back, relax, and dive into a story that will move your heart and spark your imagination. Every story here carries a message, because in the end, respect always wins. Let us begin. The world knew the name Marcus Jenkins. Billionaire investor, philanthropist, architect of entire industries. His face had graced magazine covers, his voice had steered markets, and his ideas had reshaped the future of technology. But what the world didn't yet know, not fully, was his daughter. Amara Jenkins was only 11, but brilliance radiated from her like sunlight breaking through clouds. While other children scribbled in coloring books, Amara was scribbling algorithms. While her classmates traded lunch snacks, she traded stocks from a tablet tucked beneath her desk. At 10 years old, she had designed a blockchain-based education platform that exploded into a billion-dollar company within 6 months. By 11, she was the youngest self-made billionaire in the country. Yet for all her wealth, her fame, and her influence, Amara still carried herself with quiet humility. She still held her father's hand when walking through crowded airports. She still packed her favorite purple headphones in her backpack, and when she spoke, it was with the clear-eyed directness of a child who saw injustice for what it was: unnecessary, ugly, and wrong. Marcus knew that brilliance alone wouldn't shield his daughter from arrogance. That was why he insisted on traveling with her, not as her shield but as her guide. He wanted her to see the world as it was, to learn how power flexes and falters, and to understand how dignity could disarm even the cruelest insult. That day on that flight, the lesson arrived sooner than expected. What the arrogant passenger and the dismissive flight attendant did not understand was that Amara Jenkins was not simply a girl to be brushed aside. She was history in motion, and in moments, the sky itself would bend to her will. The boarding pass trembled slightly in Amara's hand. The bold black ink of 2A, a silent witness to her rightful claim. Yet the man lounged deeper into the seat, arms crossed, jaw tight with the smug satisfaction of someone who had gotten away with something in public. "I'm not moving," he barked again, louder this time, as if volume could make theft into ownership. "I paid good money for this seat, and I'm not giving it up for a—" He stopped himself, but the pause was as loud as the word he didn't finish. Several passengers felt it, the ugliness behind it. The flight attendant's brow furrowed. "Sir, please keep your voice down," she said, but her eyes flicked toward Amara with impatience, not sympathy. "Young lady, there are several seats open in economy. We'll get you comfortable back there so we can push back from the gate." Marcus's jaw flexed as his daughter's chin dipped slightly. She wasn't crying, but humiliation spread like fire through her small frame. 11 years old, a billionaire, a pioneer, and yet in this moment, to the world around her, she was reduced to a disruption. "No," Marcus said evenly, his voice calm but ironclad. He pulled the boarding pass from his daughter's trembling hand and held it up so the attendant and the watching passengers could see. "Seat 2A was purchased for my daughter weeks ago. The record is clear, she belongs here." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Some passengers shifted, uneasy. Others looked away, their silence complicit. The man in 2A smirked, leaning forward with false bravado. "She doesn't look like she belongs in first class," he said, his words coated in venom. "She's just a kid. You expect me to believe an 11-year-old has more right to this seat than me?" The insult landed like a slap. Amara's eyes darted to her father, searching, steadying. Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his expression unchanged. He had built empires facing arrogance like this, but watching it directed at his daughter was a wound that cut deeper than any business betrayal. The attendant's lips pressed into a thin line. She looked torn, trapped between protocol and prejudice. "Sir," she said to Marcus carefully, "we're under time pressure. If you'd just move her to economy for this flight." "No," Marcus interrupted sharper this time. His calm was intact, but beneath it burned a storm. "You will enforce the ticketing system as it was purchased. My daughter will sit where she belongs." The air thickened. The passenger in 3C whispered, "This is ridiculous. Just check the manifest." But the attendant hesitated, her authority cracking. The man in 2A seized the pause, his voice rising again. "Go ahead and call security. I'm not moving, and when they hear it's me or some little girl, guess who they'll side with?" He grinned, arrogance dripping like poison. Amara's cheeks flushed deeper, her boarding pass clutched in her small fists. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but Marcus squeezed her shoulder gently, stopping her. "Patience," he murmured softly. "Let him write his own downfall." The engines rumbled faintly outside, the aircraft preparing to push back, but inside tension built like a storm cloud. Every passenger could feel it. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. It was about dignity, authority, and the cruelty of arrogance when it thinks no one powerful is watching. And what none of them realized, not the man in 2A, not the attendant, not the whispering passengers, was that Marcus Jenkins had already sent a single message from his phone. The countdown had begun. The flight attendant's walkie crackled faintly at her hip, a reminder of the authority she thought she carried. She leaned closer to Marcus and Amara, lowering her voice so it carried just enough to sound condescending, but not loud enough for everyone else. "Sir, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be," she said. Her tone had softened, but the edge of irritation remained. "You'll only embarrass your daughter if we keep arguing. Take the seats in economy. I'll throw in free snacks and extra legroom." Amara's throat tightened. Embarrass her? She hadn't done anything wrong. Yet here she stood, boarding pass in hand, being treated as though she were the problem. Marcus didn't flinch. He simply raised the ticket higher. "You think dignity can be traded for peanuts and legroom?" His voice was calm, low, but laced with quiet fire. The man in 2A chuckled cruelly. "Listen to him. Acting like this is some courtroom. It's just a seat. She doesn't deserve it. She hasn't worked a day in her life." A few passengers shifted uncomfortably, but still no one spoke up. Their silence was as heavy as chains. Amara's eyes filled with heat. She wanted to scream that she had worked, that she had written lines of code while other kids played tag, that she had built something real, that she wasn't just the billionaire's daughter, but the words stuck in her throat. The humiliation pinned them down. Marcus bent slightly toward her, his voice a whisper just for her. "Let him talk. Every word digs him deeper." The attendant straightened, frustration flickering across her face. "Fine, but if you insist on making this an issue, I'll need to involve the captain. And trust me, you don't want to delay this flight." At that, Marcus smiled faintly for the first time. "Don't I?" The smirk rattled her. She turned quickly, striding toward the galley, muttering into her walkie. Passengers leaned across aisles now, whispers rippling. "She really told a child to sit in economy. Why won't they just check the manifest?" Unbelievable. The murmurs were small but growing. The tension was shifting. Amara stood stiffly, clutching her father's sleeve. "Daddy, I don't want everyone staring." Marcus crouched, leveling his eyes with hers. "Sometimes the world stares because it sees injustice. Don't shrink from it. Let it stare. Let it see." The words settled into her chest, steadying her breathing. She nodded slowly, blinking back the tears. Just then, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Cabin crew, prepare for departure." But before the words could finish echoing, Marcus's phone buzzed. A single line appeared on the encrypted screen. "Instruction received. Do you wish to proceed with grounding?" He tapped once. "Yes." From the outside, the plane continued its routine. But inside, something invisible shifted. The countdown wasn't just figurative anymore. The wheels of authority, real authority, were already turning. The man in 2A stretched smugly, arms behind his head. "See? We're taking off. Guess money doesn't buy everything after all." He laughed, the sound brittle, trying to fill the silence with his own importance. Marcus didn't answer. He simply placed a hand over Amara's, anchoring her with his calm. The passengers, once passive, began to feel the current shifting. Some raised their phones, others whispered louder, their indignation growing like embers waiting for a spark. And the spark was coming. In mere minutes, arrogance would meet the one force it could never defeat, truth with power behind it. The cabin door clicked shut, and the air shifted. Passengers settled, but their eyes never left row 2. The injustice in 2A had infected the atmosphere. No champagne or soft jazz soundtrack could mask it. The man in Amara's seat reclined boldly, crossing his legs with theatrical arrogance. He glanced at her trembling frame and smirked. "Told you, kid, world doesn't give handouts. Better learn now." Amara clenched the boarding pass until it crumpled in her palm. His words stung sharper than the seat he stole. At 11, she was old enough to recognize cruelty and young enough to feel it like a dagger. The flight attendant returned, her tone brisk, her patience thinning. "Sir," she said to Marcus, "the captain is aware. He wants this resolved quickly. If you continue to resist, we may have to remove your family from the flight." Gasps rippled through the cabin. "Remove them? For standing in the right." Marcus rose slowly, his frame towering without aggression but heavy with presence. His eyes bored into hers. "You mean to remove the rightful passenger, not the thief in her seat, correct?" The attendant faltered, Her lips parted, but no sound came. She glanced toward the galley, hoping for backup. Amara felt every eye pressing on her now, judging, pitying, whispering. Tears threatened again, but her father's hand found her shoulder, anchoring her. "Do you see?" Marcus whispered low. "Just for her. Power reveals itself when it's tested. Watch. They'll show the world exactly who they are." The intercom chimed. The captain's voice, deep and authoritative, filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are delaying pushback. We have a seating dispute that must be addressed. Until then, remain seated." The man in 2A groaned loudly, throwing his head back. "Finally, maybe we can get this brat moved where she belongs." His words, dripping with venom, carried to every corner of the cabin. Phones tilted up, recording. No longer subtle, passengers wanted receipts. The murmur of voices grew louder, stronger, until a woman in 3C spoke boldly. "She has the ticket. I saw it with my own eyes." Others chimed in. "She's in the right. This is disgusting. Why hasn't anyone fixed this yet?" The tide was shifting, but the crew hadn't realized it. Amara's heart pounded. Her legs felt rooted to the carpet, her voice trapped behind the humiliation pressing at her chest. She wanted to vanish, but her father's calm voice steadied her. "Look around," Marcus murmured. "They're speaking now. Courage spreads, Amara. One spark becomes many." And it was true. The passengers' whispers were rising into open defiance. What began as silence was growing into outrage. The attendant raised her hands, trying to hush the cabin. "Please, everyone, calm down." But her plea was drowned out by the sudden jolt of the plane as it lurched away from the gate. Gasps erupted. A child cried out from the back. Then a heartbeat later, the engine spooled down. The captain's voice thundered, each word weighted with finality. "This aircraft is returning to the gate. Security will be boarding." Silence crashed over the cabin. Every passenger froze. Every eye turned toward Amara. The man in 2A's smirk finally cracked. The color drained from his face, and Amara Jenkins, billionaire at 11, stood trembling in the aisle, about to witness the moment arrogance came face to face with truth. The engines wound down, their fading roar replaced by the uneasy hum of whispers. The aircraft, once a vessel carrying people toward their destinations, had become a courtroom suspended in the sky. The intercom clicked again, the captain's voice colder this time. "For operational reasons, we are returning to the gate. Remain seated. Law enforcement will meet us upon arrival." The words settled like a gavel strike. Some passengers leaned back, relieved that order was finally coming. Others craned their necks, eager to witness the spectacle. All eyes returned to row 2. The man in 2A scoffed, his false bravado straining. "Good! Maybe now we can get this kid off the plane." "Entitled brat, wasting everyone's time." Gasps flared. Amara shrank into herself, but Marcus didn't move. He stood calmly in the aisle, his presence steady as a mountain. "Sit down," the flight attendant snapped at him, her nerves fraying. "You're only making this worse." Marcus's gaze swept the cabin, not confrontational but deliberate. He raised his phone slowly, the screen glowing. "This," he said evenly, "is already worse, and it is already recorded." The glow of his phone mirrored dozens more as passengers angled their devices. Screens blinked, cameras rolled. The man in 2A's smirk faltered when he realized he was surrounded not by silent strangers, but by witnesses, archivists of his arrogance. "You think you can film me?" he snapped, leaning forward. "I'll sue every single one of you." "Try," came a voice from row 3. A young woman raised her phone higher. "We all saw what you did. She has the ticket." "Yes," another man added firmly. "This isn't her fault, it's yours." The ripple spread. Murmurs hardened into declarations, quiet dissent swelling into solidarity. Amara clutched the crumpled boarding pass to her chest. For the first time since the ordeal began, she looked up, not at the passenger, not at the attendant, but at the crowd of strangers who were finally speaking. Her father's words echoed inside her. Courage spread. The man in 2A's face reddened. His voice rose. "You people don't understand. This isn't about her seat. It's about order." It's about arrogance. Marcus interrupted, his tone quiet but sharp. He stepped forward just enough for the cabin to feel his authority, and arrogance has consequences. The passenger's jaw worked furiously, but no retort came. The silence that followed wasn't his victory, it was his unraveling. Then Marcus did something no one expected. He extended the phone in his hand toward Amara. "Go ahead," he said softly. "Make the call." Her heart hammered in her chest. She glanced up at him wide-eyed. "Now? Now?" Marcus affirmed. With trembling fingers, Amara accepted the device. The screen glowed with a single name, CEO, Skyreach Airlines. Her small thumb hovered, then pressed. The dial tone rang once, twice. Then a crisp voice answered, "Marcus, what's the situation?" Gasps rippled through the cabin. The CEO on the line already? Marcus inclined his head toward Amara. "Tell her." Amara's voice quivered at first but steadied with each word. "This is Amara Jenkins. I have a boarding pass for seat 2A. A passenger stole it. The crew told me to go sit in economy." The silence that followed was electric. Passengers leaned in, straining to hear the CEO's reply. Her voice came through, sharp and furious. "Unacceptable. The flight is grounded until this is corrected. That passenger will be removed immediately." Amara blinked, the weight of her words landing like a thunderclap. For the first time, she felt it. The balance of power shifting. And the man in 2A? His smirk finally shattered. The man in 2A shot upright, his arrogance cracking like glass. "This is insane," he barked, his voice rising above the murmurs. "You can't ground a flight over a seat dispute. I have rights. I paid." "Paid for what?" Marcus cut in, his tone sharp but steady. "For a lie? For entitlement, dressed as authority?" Gasps rippled again. Cameras zoomed in. The passenger's face flushed a deeper crimson as his bluff unraveled. The flight attendant shifted uncomfortably, tugging at her uniform collar. "Sir," she said to Marcus, her voice brittle, "you can't just call the CEO directly. That's exactly what happened," Marcus replied, pulling a slim leather wallet from his pocket. He flipped it open with deliberate calm, revealing a gleaming shareholder's card embossed with the airline's crest. "Perhaps you should know who you're speaking to." Her eyes widened. The color drained from her face as she read the name stamped in silver. "Marcus Jenkins, principal investor." Whispers surged like a tide. "Investor? Wait, Jenkins? The billionaire? And the girl is his daughter?" Amara felt the air around her shift. Where moments ago there had been stares heavy with pity, now there were eyes filled with awe and shame. Passengers looked at her differently, not as a disruption, but as the girl who had just held the CEO of Skyreach Airlines on the line. The man in 2A slammed his fist against the armrest. "I don't care who you are. This is still my seat. You can't just waltz in here and—" But his words were drowned out by a passenger in 3C, who finally stood. "Sit down and shut up. We've had enough of you." Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then swelling until the cabin roared. Phones held high captured every second. The arrogant man looked around, his false confidence shriveling under the weight of collective outrage. Amara clutched the phone tighter. The CEO's voice still hummed faintly from the line. "Amara," she said firmly, "security will meet you at the gate. You have my word. No one touches that seat but you." Amara's throat tightened. For the first time that day, she smiled faintly. "Thank you," she whispered. She ended the call, handing the phone back to her father. The cabin erupted in murmurs again, passengers buzzing with the surreal truth of what they had just witnessed. The flight attendant, now pale as linen, turned sharply toward the man in 2A. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave your seat immediately." He gaped at her. "You're taking their side?" "No," she said flatly. "I'm taking the side of the truth." Cheers rose again. Passengers clapped, some even whistled, their voices cutting through the stale cabin air with righteous satisfaction. The man's face twisted, fury and disbelief warring across it. He jabbed a finger toward Amara, his voice breaking. "This is a setup. She's just a kid. You can't let a child ruin a flight." But Amara didn't flinch. She lifted the crumpled boarding pass in her hand and spoke clearly, her young voice carrying across the rows. "I'm not ruining the flight, I just wanted my seat." The simple truth landed harder than any insult. The applause that followed shook the cabin walls. For the first time since the ordeal began, Amara stood taller, not just because her father was beside her, but because strangers once silent now stood with her too. And as the man in 2A sputtered, his last defenses crumbling, Marcus leaned in close, his voice low and final. "Your arrogance has already grounded this flight. The only question now is how hard you'll fall when your lies hit the runway." The aircraft jolted to a stop at the gate. Outside, flashing blue lights washed across the windows as airport security vehicles closed in. The cabin had become a theater, every passenger a spectator waiting for the final act. The man in 2A gripped the armrests as if they could anchor him. His voice, once booming with arrogance, had turned shrill. "This is harassment. I'm the victim here. You're all going to regret siding with them." But no one listened. Phones hovered like 100 eyes, recording every frantic gesture, every desperate word. His performance was no longer intimidation. It was evidence. The cabin door hissed open. Two uniformed security officers stepped inside, their presence heavy with authority. Behind them came a Skyreach Airlines manager in a tailored Navy suit, her expression set in cold determination. "Passenger in seat 2A," one officer announced firmly. "You need to come with us." The man's face twisted. He jabbed a finger toward Amara, who stood with her father in the aisle. "She's just a kid. You're going to throw me off this flight for her?" The manager's gaze sliced into him. "For her rightful seat," she corrected sharply. "And for your refusal to comply with crew instructions, you're done." A roar of approval swept through the cabin. Applause broke out, louder than before, fueled by relief and vindication. Amara felt the sound vibrating through her small frame, like the heartbeat of justice itself. The man struggled, sputtering curses, but the officers lifted him from the seat. His feet dragged across the carpet as passengers jeered. The smug mask that once shielded him had shattered, leaving only fear and humiliation. As he disappeared through the cabin door, silence fell again, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was cleansing. The manager turned to Marcus and Amara. "Miss Jenkins," she said, her voice softer now, "please take your seat." Amara hesitated, her small fingers clutching the boarding pass. For hours it had been just paper, ignored, dismissed, crumpled in her hand. But now it felt like a crown. With her father's gentle nod, she stepped forward. Each stride felt larger than her 11 years. Passengers leaned aside, their eyes following her with admiration. She slid into 2A, her rightful seat at last. Applause thundered again, rising like a wave. This time it wasn't for Marcus, or for security. It was for Amara, for the child who had faced humiliation, injustice, and silence, and reclaimed her dignity with truth. Marcus sat beside her, his calm never breaking, but his eyes glowed with pride. He leaned close, his voice for her alone. "You see, Amara, you didn't have to shout. You didn't have to fight. The truth was always yours. And when truth stands, arrogance always falls." She nodded, tears finally spilling, but they weren't from shame anymore. They were from release, from victory. Across the aisle, passengers murmured, "She handled that better than most adults." Unbelievable composure for her age. "That girl's going to change the world." Amara didn't hear them all. She only heard the hum of the engines rising again, steady and strong, carrying her forward. She sank into her seat, clutching her toy headphones, feeling the weight of the moment settle into memory. The aircraft pushed back once more, the delay behind them. But for everyone in that cabin, the flight would never be remembered for its destination. It would be remembered for the moment an 11-year-old black girl taught them all the difference between arrogance and dignity. And somewhere deep inside, Amara knew this was only the beginning. The cabin door sealed shut again, but the echoes of what had just happened still lingered in the air. Passengers sat straighter, their faces lit with something between relief and exhilaration. They had witnessed arrogance stripped bare, dragged into the aisle, and carried out in disgrace. Amara sat in 2A at last, her small frame sinking into the wide leather seat. For the first time since boarding, She allowed herself to exhale. The humiliation had burned. Yes, but the vindication was sweeter. She glanced sideways at her father, who remained calm, his expression a mask of quiet authority. Across the aisle, passengers leaned in with soft words of encouragement. "You were so brave. Good for you, sweetheart. That man will never forget this." Amara's cheeks warmed, not from embarrassment this time, but from pride. She nodded politely, clutching her headphones and sliding them onto her lap like a shield of comfort. The flight attendant returned, no longer smirking, no longer dismissive. Her uniform seemed to sag under the weight of guilt. She stopped at Marcus's row, her voice softer than it had been all night. "Mr. Jenkins, Miss Jenkins, I'd like to apologize. I didn't handle the situation correctly. I should have verified the ticket." The apology was awkward, heavy, but it was a start. Passengers watched closely, their eyes sharp, waiting to see how Marcus would respond. He inclined his head slightly. "An apology is noted," he said evenly. "But understand, this wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, and choices have consequences." The attendant swallowed hard, her gaze dropping. She retreated quickly to the galley, whispers chasing her steps. Amara tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, why didn't you get mad? Why didn't you yell at her like he did?" Marcus turned, his eyes meeting hers with calm fire. "Because rage would have given them what they wanted. Dignity, Amara, is a weapon they can't fight. You stayed standing in the truth." That was louder than shouting ever could be. The words sank deep into her chest. She nodded slowly, the lesson rooting itself in her memory. From the cockpit, the intercom chimed again. The captain's voice returned, more deliberate now. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We regret the disruption earlier, but please know that the safety and dignity of our passengers come first. We are now cleared for takeoff." Applause broke out again, not the nervous clapping of a landing, but the triumphant cheer of a verdict delivered. Amara sat taller in her seat as the engines roared, the runway lights streaking past. As the plane lifted into the night sky, she closed her eyes for a moment. The humiliation was still there, a faint sting, but layered now with pride. She had been tested, she had endured, and she had won not by force, but by standing firm. When she opened her eyes, she found passengers smiling at her, nodding with respect. In their gazes, she saw something she hadn't expected. Admiration. Amara Jenkins, just 11 years old, had become more than a girl with a ticket. She had become a symbol, and though the flight pushed forward into the dark, the world beyond was already waking up to the story that would shake the skies. By the time the plane leveled at cruising altitude, the story had already escaped the cabin. Videos uploaded mid-flight spread like wildfire, boosted by hashtags that multiplied with each passing minute. Clips showed Amara's trembling hand, clutching her boarding pass, the passenger's sneering refusal, Marcus's calm authority, and the dramatic moment when security escorted the man off. Passengers refreshed their feeds in disbelief. "It's already trending," one whispered to another, tilting her phone so her seatmate could see. Headlines were forming in real time. "Man removed from flight after stealing 11-year-old seat." "Daughter of billionaire Marcus Jenkins humiliated before flight grounded." "Arrogance meets consequences." Amara glanced sideways at the screens but kept her eyes on her lap. The idea of being seen by millions made her stomach flutter with unease. She wasn't afraid of attention. Her life as Marcus's daughter had guaranteed that. But this was different. This wasn't about wealth. It was about dignity, and how easily people tried to strip it away. Across the cabin, passengers whispered in clusters. Some scrolled through comments online. "Everyone's on her side. That guy is finished. The airline's reputation is on the line now." Meanwhile, in a quiet row near the back of first class, a woman who had filmed the entire altercation pressed upload. The caption read, "This child showed more grace than the adults around her. Remember her name, Amara Jenkins." Within minutes, the video surged to the top of trending feeds. The flight attendant, now pale and subdued, reappeared briefly. She leaned toward Marcus and whispered, "Headquarters has instructed me to extend full service to you and your family. Complimentary for the rest of the year." Marcus's gaze hardened. "This isn't about perks," he said quietly. "It's about accountability." She nodded quickly and retreated again, her uniform no longer armor but a reminder of her missteps. Amara shifted in her seat, pulling out her journal from her backpack. She scribbled furiously, her handwriting small but sharp. Dignity is not given, it is defended. She underlined it twice. Her father glanced at the page, pride flickering in his eyes. Good, he murmured. Write it down. Remember it always. Hours later, as the plane began its descent into San Francisco, the cabin buzzed with speculation. Everyone knew the gate would be flooded with reporters, cameras, and airline officials scrambling to salvage their image. Passengers rehearsed what they'd say if asked. I was there. I saw it happen. She had the ticket. No question. And yet, despite the storm awaiting them on the ground, Amara felt lighter. The humiliation that had threatened to crush her had become something else entirely, a story rewritten in real time. Marcus adjusted his cufflinks, his expression unreadable. He wasn't thinking of the reporters or the shareholders who would soon call. He was thinking of the lesson planted in his daughter's heart, that power doesn't shout, it waits, it stands, and when the moment comes, it moves with undeniable force. The intercom chimed again. Cabin crew, prepare for landing. Amara tucked her journal away, clutching her headphones like a talisman. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready. And as the plane dipped toward the glowing sprawl of San Francisco, the world below waited, not for the flight, not for the airline, but for the girl whose dignity had grounded. The aircraft's wheels screeched against the tarmac, jolting passengers forward. A hush fell, but it wasn't the usual silence of landing. It was anticipation. Everyone knew this wasn't the end of the flight, it was the beginning of something larger. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Normally, the flight attendants would stand tall, commanding order. This time, they lingered in the galley, their authority deflated. It was clear who everyone was waiting for. The cabin door opened with a hiss. Light from the jet bridge spilled in, followed by a surge of flashing bulbs. Reporters had already gathered, alerted by the viral storm brewing online. Cameras whirred, microphones bristled. 2 security officers reappeared, their voices firm. Everyone remain seated until we escort passengers off in order. But the order felt unnecessary. No one was eager to move, not until they saw what happened next. First, the man from 2A was led forward. His once proud stride had withered into a shuffle, his face a mask of fury and shame. Passengers jeered softly, some muttering under their breath. Phones rose again, recording the final chapter of his humiliation. Entitled Thug, Bet He Never Flies Again, that's the face of arrogance losing. He barked once more, desperate. This isn't fair. She's just a kid. But the words bounced hollow in the air, met only with the click of cameras and the cold grip of security at his elbows. When he disappeared through the door, the cabin exhaled. Justice wasn't complete yet, but it was close. Then Marcus stood, smoothing his jacket with the same calm that had carried him through the ordeal. He extended his hand to his daughter. Come on, Amara. Time to walk tall. Her heart thudded in her chest. Every eye was on her as she rose, clutching her boarding pass like a banner. Together, father and daughter walked down the aisle. The silence was reverent, punctuated only by the soft applause that began in row 4 and spread until the whole cabin joined in. As she stepped into the jet bridge, the lights blinded her. Reporters surged forward, voices overlapping. Amara, how do you feel? Mr. Jenkins, will you sue the airline? What message do you have for young girls watching this? Amara hesitated, but Marcus squeezed her hand. She lifted her chin, her young voice ringing clear. I just wanted my seat. That's all. Everyone deserves their seat. The simplicity of it stunned the crowd. The cameras clicked faster. The statement, pure and unpolished, carried more weight than any rehearsed speech could. Executives in navy suits rushed forward, their apologies spilling out, their promises frantic. Miss Jenkins, we're deeply sorry. Mr. Jenkins, we'll issue a formal statement. Skyreach is committed to. Marcus raised a hand, silencing them. Save your statements. What matters is that a child was humiliated because arrogance was excused. Fix that, not for us, but for the next passenger who doesn't have cameras watching. The executives froze, chastened. The reporters scribbled faster, the line already destined for tomorrow's headline. As Marcus guided Amara through the flashing storm of lenses and microphones, she felt the weight of it all lift. She wasn't just the girl whose seat had been stolen, she was the girl who had reclaimed it, who had shown that even the smallest voice could shift the course of an entire flight. By the time they reached the black car waiting at the curb, the story was already everywhere. Screens across the country lit with her name, her face, her word. Amara Jenkins, 11 years old, had become the symbol of a lesson the world couldn't ignore. Arrogance may take your seat, but dignity will always reclaim it. The ride from the airport was silent at first. The city lights blurred against the tinted windows of the black car, the hum of traffic filling the space. Amara sat pressed against her father, her boarding pass still clutched in her hand like a talisman. The humiliation replayed in her mind, the smirk, the dismissal, the sting of being told to move where she didn't belong. Marcus rested his hand on hers, grounding her. "What are you thinking, princess?" he asked softly. She hesitated. "I thought maybe I did something wrong. Everyone was staring at me, like I didn't deserve to be there." Marcus's jaw tightened. He had built companies that bent nations, stood in boardrooms where billions were at stake, and endured insults from men who thought money and color determined worth. But nothing had cut him deeper than hearing his daughter doubt herself. "You did nothing wrong," he said firmly. He tilted her chin up so she looked at him. "You held your ground with dignity. That's more than most adults can say. The shame isn't yours, Amara. It belongs to them." Her eyes shimmered, but it hurt. He kissed her forehead gently. "I know, and it will hurt again someday, because the world still confuses arrogance with authority. But you're stronger now. You've seen it fall apart in front of you. Remember that." Amara leaned into him, letting the words sink in. Outside, cameras still flashed as the convoy turned toward their penthouse, but she no longer cared. The humiliation that once threatened to swallow her had transformed into something else, a lesson. By the time they reached home, exhaustion tugged at her small frame. She curled up on the couch, pulling her purple headphones over her ears, the familiar comfort of music washing over her. Marcus watched her, a mix of pride and sorrow etched into his features. He walked to his office, where his phone buzzed with missed calls. Shareholders, journalists, politicians, all wanted statements, sound bites, leadership, but for now he ignored them. Tonight was not about markets or headlines. Tonight was about his daughter learning that dignity, even when tested, was unbreakable. Hours later, Amara padded into the office, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She carried her journal in hand. "Daddy," she whispered, "can I read you something I wrote?" He smiled and motioned for her to sit on his lap. She opened the notebook, her handwriting neat but urgent. "Dignity isn't something you buy. It's something you hold on to when people try to take it away, even if you're scared, even if you're small. If you don't let go, no one can steal it from you." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He hugged her tightly. "That's perfect," he said, his voice thick with pride. "That's the truth." Amara closed her eyes against his chest. For the first time since the ordeal began, she felt safe, not because the world had changed, but because she... By morning, the story was everywhere. News anchors spoke with grave voices, analysts debated the meaning of dignity in the skies, and social media was ablaze with hashtags. Seat 2A, Amara Jenkins, dignity first. Clips from the cabin circulated endlessly. Amara clutching her boarding pass, the passenger's sneer, Marcus's steady calm, and the moment security dragged the man away. In her pajamas, Amara sat at the kitchen island, cereal bowl untouched. Her tablet glowed with notifications, thousands of messages, comments, and videos. At first, the attention overwhelmed her. She scrolled quickly, cheeks flushing as strangers dissected her face, her words, her tears. "Why are they all talking about me?" she whispered, staring at the flood of comments. "I didn't do anything special. I just wanted my seat." Marcus poured coffee, his voice calm. "Sometimes doing the simple right thing is what makes it powerful. Most people stay quiet. You stood there even when the whole cabin wanted to look away. That's why they're talking." She tilted her head, "But I was scared." He smiled faintly. "Courage doesn't mean not being scared. It means standing anyway." And you did. Her tablet buzzed with a new video notification. Curious. She tapped. A woman with kind eyes spoke directly into her phone camera. I was on that flight, the woman said. I saw Amara stand there, trembling but unbroken. My own daughter is 10, and last night she told me, if Amara can speak up, so can I. That's the power of what happened. Thank you, Amara. The girl's throat tightened. She blinked rapidly, her spoon forgotten in the cereal bowl. She thanked me, Amara whispered. Marcus nodded. You've already changed someone's world. Throughout the day, more clips surfaced. Passengers giving interviews, praising Amara's composure. Commentators drew parallels to larger issues, race, power, justice, while others focused simply on the universal truth that no child should be humiliated for claiming what's theirs. By afternoon, Marcus received a call from the airline CEO herself. He put it on speaker. Mr. Jenkins, Miss Jenkins, Miriam Doyle began, her voice firm but contrite. We are launching a full inquiry. The passenger has been banned permanently, and disciplinary action is being taken against the crew. But more importantly, we'd like to establish a passenger dignity initiative in Amara's name. No child or adult should ever endure what she did. Amara's eyes widened. In my name, she mouthed. Marcus squeezed her hand. We'll consider it, he said coolly, before ending the call. Then he looked at his daughter, a proud smile tugging at his lips. You see, even the people at the top have to listen when truth stands tall. That night, Amara curled up on the couch with her journal, writing furiously. She titled the page, The Day I Kept My Seat. Beneath it, she wrote, I thought I was small, but the truth made me big enough for everyone to see. She shut the book and hugged it to her chest. For the first time since boarding that plane, she felt not just safe, but powerful. A week later, the frenzy had cooled, but the story still lingered in headlines. Opinion pieces debated it, schools discussed it, and strangers online still shared the clip of Amara holding up her crumpled boarding pass like a banner of truth. But inside the Jenkins home, life was calmer. Marcus had insisted on one rule: no press, no cameras, just family. On Saturday morning, Amara sat on the living room floor with her laptop open, not to scroll social media but to answer a letter. Hundreds had poured in, but this one stood out. It was from a girl in Detroit, handwritten in purple ink. Dear Amara, I'm in 6th grade. Kids at school pick on me because I'm different. I saw your video. You didn't yell. You didn't fight. You just stood there with your truth. That made me brave. Yesterday, I told my teacher what was happening to me. I was scared, but I did it. Thank you. Amara read it aloud, her voice cracking by the end. She pressed the page to her chest. Daddy, she said, I made her brave. Marcus knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. That's bigger than any empire I'll ever build, he whispered. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but this time they carried no shame, only pride. Later that afternoon, Marcus took Amara and Nana, her cousin visiting for the weekend, to Golden Gate Park. They rented a swan boat, laughter echoing as they pedaled across the pond. The world outside buzzed with debates, headlines, and hashtags, but here, there was only sunlight, rippling water, and the sound of children's joy. As they drifted, Amara leaned back against the boat, her eyes thoughtful. Daddy, do you think people will forget? Marcus smiled softly. Maybe one day, but forgetting isn't the point. The point is what you carry forward. You didn't just keep your seat, Amara. You kept your dignity, and that will stay with you forever. She considered his words, then nodded, her small hands gripping the edge of the boat, as if anchoring herself to that truth. When they returned home, Amara opened her journal again. On the last page, she wrote, the seat was just leather and numbers, but the truth, that was mine. No one can steal it, not ever. She closed the book and placed it on her nightstand. Then she slipped into bed, her headphones around her neck, her boarding pass tucked safely into the pocket of her backpack, not as proof, but as a reminder. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching her drift into sleep. The faint hum of the city outside was steady, but inside the silence was profound. His daughter had faced the weight of arrogance and carried it with grace. She had turned humiliation into a lesson, silence into solidarity, fear into courage. And as he turned off the light, Marcus knew the truth. The world might remember the flight for its scandal, but Amara would remember it for something far greater. She had learned that dignity isn't something others give you, it's something you claim, and once claimed, it can light the way for others. And that's another story shared here on Respect Wins Stories. If this one touched you, inspired you, or made you think, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us bring more powerful stories your way. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or state in the comments, and let's see how far these stories travel across America. Remember, no matter the struggle, no matter the ending, respect always wins. See you in the next story.